Hello, everybody, and welcome to Chapter Select, a seasonal podcast where we bounce back and forth between a series exploring its evolution, design, and legacy. For this season, we are covering the Pokémon franchise. My name is Max Roberts, and I am joined, as always, by Logan Moore. Hi, Logan.
It's time to go to Trumpet Land.
That was my trumpet.
Yeah, but you didn't get to experience the real trumpets because we played the fake news remakes in this.
Yeah, we did. We were Alpha and Omega over here. That's what I should have called you. Should have introduced you as the Alpha.
Yeah, that would have been a good idea. Alpha Logan and Omega Max.
Even though we both played the correct version, Sapphire.
We did.
Groudon
still
sucks.
never played a Ruby game ever. So
good. Keep it that way. Keep it that way.
This is I was just going to chime in and say this is one that I've been looking forward to you playing, because obviously I think we've well documented on this season by now that this was one of the ones you skipped. So I was looking forward to you diving into these, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you have to say about these games as we get into this episode.
Yeah. It's always so new and fresh, which is strange. I think when you talk about Pokemon, just how big it is, someone coming in without a lot of experience with the games. It's cool. Every time something's new, and I'm looking forward really actually to everything else this season, because Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon are very different.
That'll be a fun one for both of us because we both have never played.
Yeah. And then there's Black and White and Black and White 2, like a true pair of games. That's all new to me, and so I'm excited. I'm looking forward to the rest of the season here and talking about Sapphire and Ruby. But I did want to say really quick that, even if you did play Groudon and Ruby back in the day, we'd still love you to support the show by joining Super Chapter Select, which you can do by going to super.chapterselect.com. For just $20 a year, you can sign up, support the show directly, get access to longer shows, exclusive episodes, and behind the scenes and supplementary video material. We've got our battles going on. Our Sapphire Ruby battle is done and recorded. Logan, he was very upset about the last couple of battles, and so he came in this one hot, really hot. He had a lot of pride riding on the line. His childhood version was standing over his shoulder saying, "You must win."
I've accepted my place as your rival, Max, and I'm very much leaning into this.
We're really embracing the rivalry energy here. So are you? Yes. Are you blue to my red? I don't feel like I'm a very cool red.
That's how I view it, because I'm the one who talks smack. So I gotta be the one saying "smell you later" and stuff like that. You should
sign off those videos as "smell you later." But thank you so much to our members that we have now, and you can check out more over at super.chapterselect.com.
Outside of memberships, we've also got other special things to talk about with this episode, and that would be in the form of a guest that will be joining us here in just a couple minutes. Cameron Hawkins will be joining us to break down Ruby and Sapphire, and in his case, Emerald, which is the one that he happened to play through for our discussion.
The only trifecta.
This is true.
All three versions of a generation. I think the only time this season we'll be doing that.
Yeah, I think it's the only time where we're going back, and not because otherwise we're just sticking to the remakes if there's a remake option. So yeah, we'll have Cam's take on how Emerald holds up some 20 years later. Before we do that, though, let's do our typical breakdown of everything related to Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire here. Per usual, developed by Game Freak. It originally released on the Game Boy Advance and later the Nintendo 3DS. With the remakes, the original release date was March 19th, 2003 for those of us in North America. For the original versions, the remakes launched on November 21st, 2014. The original game's director was Junichi Masuda, and the remakes director was Shigeru Omori. The producers for the original games were Hiroyuki Jina, Takahiro Izushi, and Hiyoaki Suru, I believe. I'm sorry about that. The remakes producers were Masuda, once again, Shusaki Agami, Takaru Atsunomiya. That's one right there. That's a good name. And then Hitoshi Yamagami. And then the music for the original game was Go Ichinose, Morikazu Aoki, and Junichi Masuda. And then on the remakes, the composers were Shoto Kageyama, Manako Adachi, Hideaki Kuroda, and Hitmoy Sato, I believe. And then the Metacritic, Max, I found this quite fascinating. The Metacritic aggregate score for both the remakes and the original games was an 82 out of 100.
It's riding the same wave across time and space.
Nothing changed over the 15-year gap between the original games coming out and then the remakes coming out, which is kind of interesting to me. And also, I never really looked at what the this is like kind of the gen that I never knew what the critical consensus was on it back in the day, because I wasn't reading gaming magazines at the time. I knew that like the original Red and Blue and then Gold and Silver were like big deals. I mean, they were worldwide smash hits, and that's not to say that Pokemon wasn't. I mean, it was definitely less big than I guess it was in the late 90s, early 2000s by this time. But yeah, I guess I never really thought about what these games were, how these games were received critically. So it was kind of interesting to go back and scan through some of the original reviews there for the original games, at least.
I only know about 7.8 and Too Much Water.
Yeah, I mean, that is the criticism tied to these, but it's also not wrong criticism in a lot of ways. And we can talk about that with Cam Hawkins. Cam, thanks for joining us to talk all about Sapphire and Ruby today.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. I love Pokemon, so I'm always willing to chat about it.
All right, let's kick things off, and we'll start with you, Cam. Just what was your experience like returning to this game? How do you feel about this game now, and what's your history with this game overall? Were you somebody who played it originally on the Game Boy Advance back in the day, or where's this one at in the Pokemon series for you overall?
Yeah, so I played Pokemon Ruby growing up. I vividly remember being upset getting Ruby because Sapphire was already sold out, because I believe I got it around my birthday. And while Johto and Pokemon Crystal specifically is like my favorite Pokemon game, I think Pokemon Ruby, just the Hoenn games in general, is the most hours I've put into Pokemon.
You and me.
That was kind of like the peak of my Pokemon consumption. And I still, there are things about Hoenn that I really, really, really love to this day. And I played through Pokemon Emerald for the first time, actually. And because I was always told, like, oh, Pokemon Emerald is basically like, it's the Pokemon Crystal of Hoenn. And, like, it's notably better than Ruby and Sapphire. And after playing it, I don't know if I agree with that. Like, I'm not saying that it's not a great, like, one of the best Pokemon entries, because it is. But I think a large part of that has to do with Hoenn being such an interesting region than like the additional content / changes that they made in Emerald compared to Ruby and Sapphire. And I will say that I have played the Hoenn remakes, and I think they're bad. I just think they're straight up bad. I think that, like, especially when you compare them to Heart Gold and Soul Silver, it's been a long time since I played them, because I played them relatively soon after they came out. But, you know, one of the most disappointing games I've played in recent memory, for sure. It just, and I don't know if it's because, you know, the Pokemon games are in 3D now, or if it was the changes that they made, but I just don't think Hoenn translated well in a 3D space, because it focuses a lot on water, which I think is one of the strengths of Hoenn, but not in the way, you know, not in the artistic direction that they went with Alpha Sapphire and Omega Ruby. And when I say it's bad, I don't think it's like a bad game, but I think it's one of my least favorite Pokemon games, to be more specific. But yeah, so that's basically my experience. Again, like I enjoyed my time with Emerald, but I kind of expected more. I had like higher expectations going into them, and there have been other Pokemon games in the past where like I heard like kind of similar praise, and I think those expectations were met, but I don't think Emerald is one of them.
I'm gonna jump in here before you, Max, because if I'm right, you've never played these games until now. No. And I know I kind of have a similar story as Cam. Yeah, like I said, this is by far the Pokemon games I have played the most. I've never actually played the remakes until now, so I played Alpha Sapphire this time. And I agree, a lot of the charm of the original games was very much lost in this remake, especially, and we'll talk about this more later, but like the music just did not stand up. And I know the Ruby and Sapphire soundtracks get a lot of like, there's a lot of memes with them and trumpets, and like that's what people talk about when they talk about these games. But I love those soundtracks. I think those original soundtracks are like top tier Pokemon music. So when I got to the final battle with Steven in the remake and there's not the trumpets blaring like crazy in the final champion theme, I'm like, this sucks. I don't like this at all. They replaced like so many of the horns in that final champion battle with like keyboards and things like that. I'm like, no, this is not, it's not the same. It's not, there's not the, I don't know. There's something about those games in that era. And I agreed, like Sapphire was the one I played. And I can't even tell you how many times over I played that game as a kid, like probably like 8 to 10 times. I've probably put over 1,000 hours or more into that game alone, let alone Emerald whenever I got that. And I've still never played any version of Ruby to this day, which is kind of bizarre. But yeah, so we have similar stories in that regard. And I enjoyed, the thing I'll say going back to it as somebody who played the remake by comparison to you, Cam, is I did get my nostalgia fix from this playthrough. And so it's hard for me to look at these games and not still like them like quite a bit. Like I had a really good time playing through Alpha Sapphire, and there are drawbacks with the remake that I do not love. And I think the original game's better, but as just a good 30-hour hit of nostalgia playing through the game once through, like it did its job in that regard to me. And so this was a fun one for me to play through and revisit, and gave me a lot of those warm feelings I had as a kid. Because I should point this out too. This game is really special for me because I bought my SP, my Game Boy Advance SP in tandem with this game. When my parents bought that for me for my birthday, they said, what is the one game you want? And it was like Pokemon Sapphire. And so that was that was my introduction to like that era, because I didn't have a Game Boy Advance prior. So that was my original Game Boy Advance game, and that's partially why I played it so much. So I have just general fondness for this era of Pokemon, that game, and a lot of those feelings are tied up together with like my first experience with the SP, the backlit screen, all of that stuff. Like,
oh yeah.
So it's like, that's like one of my favorite eras of gaming ever. And so, there's a lot of positive feelings tied up in this game. So it's hard for me to say too much bad about it.
Sure.
But there are definitely some drawbacks that I'll get into. Max, blind playthrough person, what do you think?
Well, I have some history, not necessarily playing the game, but at some point in my youth, I became infatuated with mudkips. There was memes at the time. I heard you like mudkips. There's clips from the anime and stuff. And that gave birth to my first email address, mudkip143@hotmail.com. You know, you can send an email to that. That account is defunct as all get out. But
my original email was bulbafan1@aol.com.
I love it. So Pokemon email addresses come strong. So I'm still stuck with that username in some ways. It's still my PSN. I know I can change it, but the names I want aren't available. So it's like, what's the point? So Mudkip has followed me my entire life, or most of my gaming and adult life. And I was always infatuated with like the see-through cartridges, but I just wasn't allowed to play Pokemon at the time. I wouldn't actually come back to Pokemon until the next generation on the DS when I was about 13 years old. So I guess that's kind of like my rough experience in general with this generation. Now coming into it fresh here on the 3DS, because I also played Alpha Sapphire, because Kyogre's just better in all ways. I wish I played the Game Boy Advance version, mostly because of just the technical performance. It just doesn't run well on 3DS, quite frankly.
This is the same thing with X and Y. X and Y is the same thing. Did you ever try to turn to 3D on?
I did. It drops dramatically. And so I was actually jealous of Cam because when we kind of reached out and pitched doing this episode, he asked if he could just play Emerald on, I think you played it on your Pocket or something. And as I was playing through this, I was like, dang, I kind of wish I did that too. Because I have Sapphire, in the drawer over there. I could have done it. So as a 3D game, I wasn't actually particularly fond of it. And it's it's interesting generation. Narratively, we're coming out of we have a new team, rivalry team, and like focus there. There's new gyms and a narrative push. There's like a lot of like the world is ending kind of pressure around it, which is a first for Pokemon up to this point, right?
This became very common in every other installment in the future.
Yeah.
It just goes from a group trying to kidnap Pokemon to Pokemon that control space, time, and the earth and the sea and everything in between. Yeah.
So that was an interesting juxtaposition.
Yeah, and I'll say that, like, this is one of the key points I want to talk about that is, like, probably one of the worst things about this generation is that Team Magma and Team Aqua have to be the stupidest team in all of Pokemon. Like, they're just like, there's just like one team. We want to drain the water and cover the earth with more land. And then it's like, that's stupid because everyone's going to die. We want to expand the ocean and make more and cover the land. That's stupid because people are going to die.
I totally agree. That whole like, this is our goal just never really made sense. And I don't know what the post game is like in Emerald or even these base GBA games, but for the remakes, they made that Delta episode where there's Deoxys shows up and you get Mega Rayquaza and all that stuff. And that just was like, now an asteroid's going to crash into Earth and we're all going to die, so stop it. And that just felt almost too extreme alongside the plot of, you got to go get all the gym badges and fill out your Pokedex, but also stop evil.
Can I just say one thing about the Delta episode really quick? My favorite thing is that you literally fly into space on the back of a dragon to destroy a meteor that's hurtling towards Earth, and then 5 minutes later, your parents are like, come on, inside, let's eat dinner. And they're like, what a good young boy. I'm like, this is so, what is this dichotomy here? Like, this little 12-year-old kid is blowing up meteors, and it's just so, it's very goofy. Yeah, the stakes are too high for what's happening. I don't know. It just doesn't take itself serious.
Yeah. The stakes are silly, but like, I think the actual Delta episode in itself is one of the highlights of the remakes. Because, in the original games, you had to get Deoxys or Jirachi through events.
Yep.
And at that time, you had to go to physical, like, Pokemon events to get these.
Go chill in a Toys R Us on a specific Saturday or something
exactly,
like that.
to get these Pokemon. And then you'd, like, interact with, like, the meteors in Mozdeep, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right.
It's cool. Like, I think that it does a good job at, like, just introducing all that stuff. And then also, like, ways of, which a lot of Pokemon games nowadays are, like, once you get to the post game, it's just all a legendary catch-a-thon. Like, you can just, like, almost all the legendaries are just somewhere that you can catch.
Yes.
It's interesting here in the Delta episode, they're also not only giving you a bunch of legendaries, but also a bunch of generational starters. Like, if you go back to Little Root, you get the Totodile or Cyndaquil, and if you do other events, you'll get Gen 4 and Gen 5 starters as well, and I'm sure Bulbasaur and Gen 1's in there too. So it's just like, here's all the Pokemon you want, which is weird today with the Pokedexes being trimmed down. This felt more, here's everything.
Yeah, they try to dump everything in your lap at a single time, which is kind of nice. I don't know. That one thing I will say about the Delta episode, since we're talking about it, and I don't have too much else to say about, like, the characters that are destroyed. I did appreciate that Rayquaza finally got fleshed out and was, like, given some actual attention, because even in the original games, except for, I forget how Emerald is because it's been so long since I played it, but in the other games, it's just like, oh, I'm going to go get a mock bike and go to the top of this tower. And oh man, there's a dragon up here. And then that's about the extent of all you know about Rayquaza, is that there's just some crazy green dragon at the top of a tower that you biked up.
Yeah. In Emerald, it's basically both Kyogre and Groudon are like fighting each other in Sutopolis, and you have to go to Sky Pillar, which you don't even get to catch him at this point. You just have to go up there to catch, or to just interact with Rayquaza, and then Rayquaza basically just ascends from the heavens and is like, y'all stop fighting, and then that's what happens. and then after that you go back to Sky Pillar, and then you can catch him, and you have the Master Ball I mean, even before the first encounter. So it's just like, why couldn't I just catch him in the beginning and just be like, all right, Rayquaza, here. I get it, because like the story, you know, you could technically like kill Rayquaza and not catch him, but like it's just one of those things like, oh, I gotta go all the way up there, and then like the puzzles to get up there, while not like strenuous, they're different, and it's a little bit more difficult, and it's just and I'm just like, why can't I just go back up there again and just throw my Master Ball at you, like. So
I want to bring it back and talk about the world a little bit more, specifically in regards to too much water, which I know is like the big meme thing with this game. But no, like this is something I never understood why that was a thing, because there very much is a lot of water in this game, and this game has been designed with that in mind. There are 3 HMs in this game that hinge on water. And so
you need them all.
You need them all. The Pokédex is filled with water Pokemon, which I actually like, because in some of the later gens, there's not enough, and I kind of hate that. And I like that there's different types of water Pokemon that live way under the sea. Like I think of Relicanth that you can only get if you're diving further down and stuff like that. Like that stuff is cool to me. And I think they did a good job of fleshing out, like, yeah, you can catch this Pokemon with a rod, but you can't get this one unless you go to the very bottom of the ocean and stuff like that. I always thought that stuff was really cool. And even as a kid, seeing all of, like when I started running around post game and seeing all the different dive locations that are on the map, like I'm sure this is something you didn't maybe notice, Max, because you just did a beeline playthrough, but there are so many dive locations on this map that you can dive down and discover crazy things. I didn't do it with this playthrough, but everything with Regice, Registeel, and Regirock is super dope. I used to love that stuff, and having to like interpret the braille that they put on the walls and stuff like that. And there's like a ton of secrets packed in this game, Max, that are really, really cool.
Yeah.
I kind of talked about 50 things there, but what are your guys' thoughts on like the general layout of the game and how water's used and all that sort of stuff?
What I want to say really quick is that like the specifically Flash and Waterfall, like HMs could like not be in this game, at least for the original. For the original, like there was 2 caves that I needed to use Flash in. One being Victory Road, which like, come on, you don't need to do that.
That was brutal.
And
in
then
the remakes,
like,
it's a TM, which is even more insane. Is it a? I can't remember. Yeah. In the remakes, it is a TM that you get. Is TM like whatever Flash.
And so I had an Alakazam on my team, and I gave it Flash, you know, in the beginning when it was like an Abra. So I was like, okay, cool. And then I removed it because I was just like, I don't need this anymore. And then I get to the Victory Road. I'm like, so now I have to pass up one of my moves that I actually care about to give it Flash, because I already had like a Sableye to like Sableye. What is like the Bidoof of Hoenn, because like it can learn Rock Smash, it could learn Cut. I was like, okay, cool, like you are my HM Pokemon for this team. And then I had like an Aggron for strength, and then I have a Walrein for Surf and like Dive, and but yeah, with Waterfall, I only needed Waterfall to get to Victory Road. Like that is the only time I used it. It's like this like y'all could have designed it differently so that this did not need to happen. And so those 2 things like really frustrated me. But the dive stuff, like I wish that is like the one thing I wish that they carried over through all the Pokemon games. Like diving underwater and just exploring and like all that stuff was so cool. Cause like the water exploration in Hoenn for me is one of the highlights. Like I loved exploring and like finding, because when I was a kid and I wasn't like as, you know, I wasn't as smart and stuff like that, and I would just come across stuff just by surfing around, and I got to a city, I'm like, oh my god, I'm at a city, like what's going on, you know, like what's going on with this, and I was like, oh, this is where the next gym badge is, and like it just felt so new and different that you just don't like, that is the only generation of Pokemon that I felt that way. I felt that way where it's just like just the pure exploration of coming across another like a city like that without, you know, instead of every other game where it's just like, all right, go down the routes and then you find out like, and then you just end up going to the next town or the next city and then you do the thing, and it did have that sense of uniqueness to it. And yeah, I love diving underwater. I loved the thing I do, because you do make a good point about like there being a lot of water Pokemon. They don't come up very often is the thing, because there is, but also like if you're surfing, you're running into a Tentacruel. Or a Tentacle. You're running into a Tentacle, or you're running into, you know, and it's, but then like you see these trainers, they got Goldeen, Seaking, Staryu, like
Wailmer, Wailord, Crawdaunt.
Yeah, like even Wailmer,
like
I remember running into Wailmer, and like I didn't run into a single Wailmer during this playthrough, and it's just like it kind of, you know, I wish there was a little bit more variety there, because you know we talk about like how there's so many Zubats in caves. Like, well, on the fucking water there's a lot of tentacles, let me tell you that.
Yeah, I had one of those because I needed something that could learn waterfall and dive. I already had a Pelipper that had surf, but it can't learn waterfall or dive. Makes sense, it's a bird. But so my thing was, now I have Pokemon taking up slots on my team, which is taking experience from the XP share, not building up the actual team I want. And to get up to Victory Road and through it, you have to have that Pokemon with you. So it's just eating up all this experience right toward the end. And then as soon as you get to the computer, you get rid of it and bring in your actual team. And it just felt frustrating. It makes me really appreciate the games today where I'm thinking like Legends and Scarlet and Violet, where it's just all an ability on the overworld. It doesn't take a move slot. You could just go and do anything.
This game really made me think about like what the purpose of HMs was back in the day, and like trying to like wait, why are we still doing this? And it was really only to intentionally roadblock the player so that they couldn't advance to a part of the game that the developers didn't want them to advance to ahead of time. It was like, it's basically just purposeful roadblocks. Like, we don't want you to go to Victory Road, so how will we do that? We'll lock Victory Road behind a waterfall. But then you think about it, it's like you look at previous games, it's like, well, they could have just locked Victory Road behind badges or whatever, like they do in the Indigo Plateau. Like, you can't enter the Victory Road until you flash all 8 badges, and then you go through there. Like, why wouldn't they do that if they want to keep players from going through that, so to reaching those areas early? So yeah, I don't know. Like, some of the decisions in this game don't really make too much sense. But
yeah, I was gonna say, like, this isn't also exclusive to Hoenn. It happens in Johto, it happens in Kanto. It probably happens in Sinnoh too. It's just like, I think this is where it's at its worst, because it requires the most amount of HMs to do that stuff, which that's very frustrating,
especially HMs of a single type too. Like, having 3 HMs dedicated only to water types is pretty crazy, because no one wants to put 3 HMs, like, even if you are carrying a water Pokemon on your team, no one wants to put 3 HMs on a single Pokemon.
No.
That you are like imagine if you start with a Mudkip or something, no one wants to have that be the only moves they have on their Marsh Stomp. So
it's just not. It is a kind of frustrating throughout the game. As far as the world itself, there's a lot of water, but a Repel fixes the problem of running into too many things on the water and serving and stuff. It just takes so much. I don't know, at least in the 3DS version, it's fast enough, I suppose, walking around. I don't know how fast the surf animation would have been, how fast you feel like you're going on the Game Boy, but it didn't feel too bad. And I was beelining everything, so it wasn't a lot of meandering or exploring a lot of the ocean, which I know wouldn't have been what I did as a kid if I was playing it when I had endless time and wanted to explore. So the too much water to me felt more like just the typing and the HMs like we talked about, not necessarily the world. I think it was actually cool that the world was basically split in two, where it was the eastern half is water and islands and communities there, and then the western half is land and there's a big volcano type thing. It was cool, and it matches the legendaries and the Team Aqua and Magma. Like, this world fits very well into the narrative and the Pokédex. It's all very cohesive, and I think that's actually a really cool design. Instead of just having, here's your spooky ghost tower in Lavender Town, and here's your water gym and it's by some water. It's this world feels truly designed from the ground up altogether. The decks, the story, the world.
The coolest town is Pacifilog, is the one that I think is like coolest.
Really? I think it's the Fortree city.
Fortree is very cool. I guess I was speaking it specifically in regard to like the water stuff, like how they use the water within the world.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, Fortree is really cool and unique too. And is it Pseudopolis, the one with the 8th gem?
You have to dive under. Like, it's one of those things. Like, it honestly like made me, because I watched the anime as a kid, but I wasn't like on top of it like every week. So I'm like, I kind of want to like go back and see how Ash got to these towns and like what they look like, how they were like represented in the anime. Like, how did he get to Pseudopolis? Did he like take a submarine down there? Like, well, what happened there? Or like, how do you get? What does Pacific Log Town look like in the actual anime? Because it's like on the water. I think that there's a lot of cool stuff there with the creativity behind the towns. Again, like, these are the things about Hoenn that I think are the kind of the most that make it stand out from like most of the other regions for me. Is just like, there's just things there that you can only get from Hoenn. And I think a big part of that was just because like the team at Game Freak probably thought of like how Kanto and Johto were like, while like Johto's still my favorite region, they wanted to do something very different and like not make you think about like Kanto and Johto like this is a brand new fresh experience. And it does feel like that, like in every way, like when it comes to the visuals, the gameplay, introducing double battles, the Pokemon, right? There's not a whole lot of Johto or Kanto or Johto Pokemon that you catch in the wild.
Just endless tentacles.
Yeah, tentacles. The general ones like Tentacool, Geodude, Zubat. Like, those are like the big three, but in general, there's a lot of variety. And I also think that it also did a good job at placing important like locations in each town and city to make them easily remembered. Like, where the daycare is, like where the move deleter is, because it's like right next to the Lily Cove supermarket. Like, there's all these different things that are relevant for players that they put in spots that can be pretty easily remembered, where you don't have to look at the signs in front of the houses every time. I just think that it is one of the most varied regions, and it's from what I can tell, there isn't like a whole lot of it's not really like based off of any sort of like country or architecture. Like, even Johto, like, I love Johto, right? But it's very feudal Japan inspired architecture in a lot of locations, and it really does feel like it's just its own thing. And it does, and I would say that it does for like Sinnoh and Unova too. But I just like, again, just with the variety of the land versus the water, just like that theme of Ruby and Sapphire, it makes it stand out in a way that I don't think the other two really do.
I was looking this up because I was curious if this was the first Game Freak to leave the inspiration of Japan and start designing their regions around other places around the world. It's not, but it is based off this main island of Japan, Kyushu, and I'm looking at pictures of it, and it's basically a giant volcano surrounded by water, which totally mirrors the game, right? And so it's cool to see them tapping into a different part of Japan, because when you think of Japan, you do think of the temples, that feudal style, what you saw in Johto and Kanto. And this is a different side of Japan, the fishing village angle, the volcanoes, the islands, which are huge in that region. So it is cool to see different sides of Japan come through. And it makes more sense actually knowing that, why they designed Hoenn that way.
I wanted to ask about some of the additional stuff that gets thrown into these games because obviously this is all present in the remakes, but they tried to throw a lot at I feel like Ruby and Sapphire was definitely just 2 installments where they wanted to hit the broad beats of what worked well in Red and Blue and Gold and Silver, but they tried to introduce a lot of new things in these games and see what would work. I think back to Double Battles. This is where Double Battles got introduced. I'm not sure if you're aware of that, Max.
No, makes sense though.
Yeah, this is where Double Battles came from. I mean, but then we've got stuff like beauty contests, which are just kind of like...
I love the beauty contests.
I was going to ask if anybody liked them, because it really is just like a subset of like... You can tell their thinking on that front was like, what's another gym-style activity we can throw in this? Because people clearly love gyms, so what can we do? And... that was what came about. I've never liked the beauty contest, though. I don't think Max liked them either. I don't know if Max even participated in a single one.
Not in this game. As a kid, I definitely did in Diamond and Pearl.
Okay.
I was definitely into it then. But this time I was like, I don't want to... Again, I was beelining things. So I was just like, give me through, give me through, give me through.
Yeah, I don't know. Some of this stuff, it's interesting. Like, I think of the beauty contest, and they haven't gone back to that. And was Diamond and Pearl the last time they ever did that? Or was it in black and white as well?
I don't remember.
I don't think it's been in any. I don't think it's been in anything since Diamond and Pearl that I can think of, but I could very much be wrong on that front. Yeah, I don't know. You can. This game is very interesting just because you can tell they're experimenting, and kind of like what you were saying, Cam. Like Johto and Kanto are very tied to the hip, both literally, and those games are very much just like Gold and Silver are very much building off of the architecture of what was done in Red and Blue, and this game is trying to be something completely new, and in the process this really sets the stage for Diamond and Pearl and Black and White. It doesn't feel like they really do another total sort of shift again, at least a drastic one, I feel like, until X and Y, where they try to turn things around a little bit again. There are like some tentpole Pokemon entries like that where they try to change the direction of the series or change what Pokemon has been up until that point. And I really feel like a lot of the stuff that was introduced in this game was then a lot of the ideas were then expanded upon in the next 2 generations that we saw. So in that regard, I think this entry these 2 games are very important to the Pokemon series, and I'm not sure if they would have the long-term success otherwise. But yeah, I don't know. What did you think, Max, about like kind of what did and didn't work in this game? Because one thing is, what was it you and I were talking the other day, and you're like, this was just thrown in the remakes, right? And I'm like, no, that was in the base game.
I definitely thought like the beauty contests and berries. I thought berries were...
Oh yeah, you didn't know Pokeblocks were a thing. And I was like,
Pokeblocks,
nope,
yes, for your Milotic. Yeah, so I thought that was all stuff introduced later that then they brought into the remake to, you know, make it on parity with X and Y at the time and future generations. So it was eye-opening to have Logan say that it really was all introduced here. I think this was a cutoff generation, right? This was Game Freak separated Gen 1 and 2 from Gen 3 here. There was no trading between 2 and 3. This was like the new start, essentially. And I think that's where you see a lot of this, where we're building the new foundation of Pokemon and we'll build off that. And quite frankly, I think it's still the foundation today. Maybe not so much, I guess, with Scarlet and Violet. Maybe that and Legends being the new structure they're going to be building off of. But I haven't played Black and White, and we will later this season. But I do know in Diamond and what I've played of X and Y, and now this is all from that generation, and even a little bit in Sword and Shield to a certain degree. It all kind of really started here, and I think Game Freak really wanted to establish solid things to explore and expand upon. I looked it up. Pokemon Black and White and Black and White 2, they didn't have beauty contests. They had Pokemon musical. But the idea of having your Pokemon engage in something besides battle. And what do we see later on in Sword and Shield? Camping and being able to pet and interact with your Pokemon in a 3D space.
Cooking the food and eating it with the bad animation in Scarlet and Violet.
Yeah. And I think it's cool that we see this in Johto a little bit, where they're in kind of horrific ways where they're like, we're chopping off Slowpoke's tails to cook them and eat them. Or we have this Miltank farm. That's actually decent because, they're getting milk or whatever. But Pokemon live in this world outside of being wild or being in battles. And I think these ideas, these different mechanics show that Pokemon do interact in the world. And that's a theme throughout the games, right? Pokemons and humans interacting and living and thriving together. Machamps or whatever, they're like part of the mail package delivery service. It's Latias and Latios fly you around town, I guess. It's cool to see the world be fleshed out in that way.
I want to go back. Let's talk about, we talked about the story a little bit before, mainly in regards to like Team Magma and stuff and Team Magma and Team Aqua and some of the larger through lines with the legendaries and stuff like that. I feel like we touched on that stuff adequately, but I did want to talk about kind of your character's like introduction to this world, because they do something different, which is try to make your dad's a gym leader, which is a totally different idea and concept that they've never really played around with before, which is a cool one. And not only that, but they introduced Max mentioned this before we started recording, but Crystal was the first one where you could choose between a male or female character, but this one did the thing where whatever character you didn't choose was then your rival by default, which was kind of a cool little wrinkle there. So you could play through the games multiple times and have different rivals depending on whatever character you didn't select. So in that regard, I guess, just what did you guys think about some of those ideas? Max, I'll toss this to you first, because I know you talked about how you didn't think everything with facing Norman or your dad in the game was you just didn't think it was as good of a moment as it could have been, I guess.
Yeah, I think they squandered that kind of reveal or that kind of really hype battle. I think there was real potential there for it to be this, holy smokes, I'm fighting my dad now, and there's a real chance. He's a midway gym leader, so you kind of are getting halfway through the game instead of him being the 8th gym leader, or even maybe the champion.
I think that's smart, I will say. And where they put it in the game is like, it's before you go anywhere to the west of the west side of the map, which I kind of like. You do a sort of loop and you come back.
East side of the map.
Or the east side of your dad. Yeah, before you go west is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, east. I keep saying yes. You get fine.
It's just, I don't know. It didn't feel like it built up the right way. You stop by, and he's like, you got to go get stronger and come back. And then my thought was that would be the 8th, that would be the end, right? Is I finally am strong and it's halfway through. So it just didn't feel as exciting as it could have been. And then when you win, he's kind of like, good job. I don't know. There just wasn't this dynamic there. And then you go off and then it's over. It never loops really back into that. Your dad is still a gym leader, to his wife's chagrin, because they can't go see the rocket launch or whatever. So I don't know. It just felt kind of like, we need something different, so we'll do it like that. It is more, in Johto, it's cool where you learn that, is it Silver is the rival in that game? Is that what
Silver?
Yeah.
Like Silver is the son of Giovanni. Like that, that's something you pick up on later in the game. And so like that was a cool thing to learn. But this just felt like, your dad's a gym leader, whatever. I think the thing in like Sword and Shield and Logan, I know that you were like, well, it's in your face the whole game. It wasn't as great. But I think the idea of your neighbor as the rival, his older brother is the undefeated champion. And so the whole game, it's like, he's undefeated. He's really great, helps the community. He loves battling. That's who you're going to fight. And I think that that pays off better because you do get there and it's a struggle and you have to fight all of these gym leaders again right before him. And they're cool battles in that game. And then you fight him after more final silly stuff. And that battle is fun. And the music really amps that up. And it's a big stadium. And so the environment in that is different. But I just feel like this dad battle fell kind of flat where it was just another gym leader and it just so happened to be your dad.
That's fair. That's still, I mean, like, for sure. Like, at the time, I think that it was cool because, like, not only was it your dad, like, this is the first game where you actually have a dad. Like,
that's true. Know, they've always did the Disney thing where it's like,
but I do think that there is a, I do think there, like, it's funny because it's funny because his name's Norman and is like he is normal Pokemon. That's also really
I didn't
really
even pick
funny.
up on that.
You know, people are talking about Larry, the normal guy, but I'm just like, yo, Norman, the normal guy.
And he has two slackings. Like he doesn't even have three.
It's also interesting because like Norman is in the anime is May's dad.
Yes.
And like so. Yeah, and May and Max's dad. So it's kind of weird how like they try and like implement that into the anime as well. But it's you know, it's cool. Like, and it doesn't really happen again. So it's not like they try and do it again in a way in a way to be like, oh, we're trying this again but better. So like it may not be great in 2023 or as effective, but at least it's something that like they kind of like stuck their guns with and they haven't like tried to reiterate it you know, in a future region or anything like that. I do think that, you know, what you're saying, because you're talking about like Hop and Leon in Sword and Shield, like that is cool. Like I do, but I also think that there is some sort of like there is a level of magic to not knowing who the champion is until you get to them.
Yes. Fully agreed.
And so, like, I mean, because that's what the first game was, right? Like the first game, you know, you find out that the champion is your rival. Your rival just became the champion. Now you have to take down your rival, and that's like the final fight, right? And I do like, and this is something, you know, Johto, like, you know that, I mean, you don't know that Lance is the champion, I don't think, but like, you can add 2 plus 2 together. He's name
dropped a lot, especially the later you get into the game. And
but also like I get that they want to try and change things up, like, and it's like, no, we're gonna like show you who this person is and why they're significant. While like with Leon in like Sword and Shield, people are like, oh, he's the champion, and you see him and like that's it. But like I think in Johto they actually like show why Lance is the champion, like without seeing him like actually like battle or stuff like that. Like you feel his significance than just like him appearing and being like, oh, I'm the champion, and then like that's kind of it.
Well, this sets me up well. I wanted to ask you about Steven. I wanted to lead this into us talking about Steven. So how do you guys think Steven is handled in this game? Because he's one of my favorite champions in the entire Pokemon series. I think Steven's awesome, and they're not too heavy-handed with it, which is what I like. It is very subtle that you just keep kind of running into this guy. It's a little more heavy-handed in the remakes, Max. But in the OG games, you kind of bump into him a couple times, and you don't really know much about him. And then you get to the end of the game, and he's like, oh, yeah, I'm the champ, by the way. So, and I think that was such a cool reveal when I played those games. And his team's really awesome, too. I like his team.
Yeah, I think, and that's one of the, we'll get into this in a sec, but like, I think that Steven is the best handled champion in the series. Like, I love Lance. Lance will be my number one boy, because I think he's just like, for me, he's like iconic. But I think like when it comes to the story and implementing them into the narrative, I think that Steve has done the best. That being said, in Emerald, he is not the champion.
Yes, which is the worst part.
which
Yeah,
is a mistake. It's a mistake.
It's one of the great crimes of Emerald. Did you know that before you played it, Cam?
I feel like I did, but I kind of forgot. Like I kind of forgot until I got to that point. I was just like, oh yeah, right. I don't think he's the champion in this game, and it's Wallace, who is the 8th gym leader in the other, like in Ruby, Sapphire, Alpha, Sapphire, Omega, Ruby too, right? Yeah, he's the champion. You can still fight Steve post game in Emerald, but it's not the same. It's not the same.
That's surprising.
And Wallace still has a full water team, right?
And he still has a full water team. Yep. Which, I mean, like, I'm not opposed to the champion having like a same type team. So like that doesn't really bother me.
With Lance, especially Gen 2 with Lance, it was a little different because dragons were OP at the time. Nowadays, not as much. So having a full dragon team back in Gen 2 was like, oh my God, I'm going to get my ass handed to me. But yeah, having a champion like a full basic type like water, it's like, that's a little, okay. Like, I think I can handle this actually.
Yeah, I mean, there was some variety to make it a little bit more challenging. Like they had like, he's like a Tentacruel, so it's like water poison. Especially because I pay like we didn't talk about it yet. We didn't talk about the starters we picked, but I picked Torchic.
We're all three in lockstep then.
Okay, because Blaziken, in my opinion, is the best Final Fire evolution in Pokemon. Like of the starters,
it's one of them.
I like Blaziken. I like Blaziken more than Charizard. I do. Like, I love Cyndaquil. Like, I'll pick Cyndaquil over Torchic, but I'm gonna pick Blaziken over Typhlosion. Like, that's just like the reality. One of the things that sucks about Hoenn, not a lot of electric types. So, that sucked.
You can get like a Manectric, and that's about it.
And a Magneton.
That's about it.
Those are your
options. Good luck.
So I had an Alakazam with Shockwave, and that's it. And I was in my Rayquaza, which is level 70. So like literally what I did was I just overpowered them with Rayquaza because I had a Rayquaza. Yeah. That was like level 70 something. But going back to Steven, I do like how they implemented Steven. I like how they implemented him in Emerald as well. Like he's still like relevant, he's still prevalent in the story. It's just like when you get towards the real like the Sutopolis part of the story, it's when Wallace comes in and it's just like, what are you doing here? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And also what's cool about Steven, you guys might have talked about it when you did the Johto episode, but you meet Steven in the post game of Heart Gold and Soul Silver. There's somewhere where you run into him and he gives you one of he like makes you choose a color and it basically gives you one of the Hoenn starters.
Yeah.
Which was really cool,
I forgot that that's a thing, but yes, now that you mention it, I remember doing that back in the day.
Yeah, it's just like Steven doesn't like, the thing that's cool about Steven is that he doesn't give the energy of a champion. He just like he feels like a normal guy that
just kind of a chill dude who's like, I'm really good at training Pokemon as well.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
I like him more than like I feel like the two champions that get pit against one another a lot in terms of like whoever the fandom's behind is Steven and Cynthia. And there's like a cult of Cynthia where everybody's like, she's the greatest trainer ever. She's so like, and I'm like, nah, Steven's just like a chill dude who's also champ, and like that's why I like him. He's just pretty relaxed in these games.
I mean, people like Cynthia just because she's notoriously the hardest champion.
Yes.
Like because she has that Garchomp that's just very powerful. Like and it's true. Like I feel like Cynthia is the last champion, and I haven't played Scarlet and Violet, so I might be wrong about this. Yeah. But I feel like Cynthia is the last champion that actually like posed a real challenge when you play when you get to the champion. Like I remember in X and Y, like X and Y is easily the easiest Pokemon game. Like it is. I know like Pokemon's meant for children, like it's directed towards children, but like it was dumb how easy X and Y was. I beat the entirety of the Elite Four and Diantha with a Lapras. That's it. I used one Pokemon. And so like,
That's been that's my biggest problem, X and Y forward, is that the series gets too easy. And I feel like Max, I don't know, did this game push back against you with the remakes? Because I feel like it was a little bit better balanced compared to X and Y, which, Cam, you're right, are like baby level simple. Like you could just spam the same moves and you're gonna win. And yeah, like I really do not care for those games because of that reason. But I felt like these games were a little bit more difficult, but I still never had to grind in this game, I guess I should say.
It's fine. I didn't really feel like I had to grind or anything like that. I kind of just kept the pace up going however I needed to. But I gotta say, I don't really care for Steven. I think he's too plain. He's just like, hi, I like rocks. I'm trying to figure out what's going on in the world. And then he just shows up at the end like, haha, I'm also the champion. But he's not really, I don't know. He doesn't seem like a guy who's defending his title. Like, I don't know. And then he's just around to help. And in Delta, I actually really didn't like his motivations or anything. He's kind of, in a way, one of the antagonists feels too strong, but he is a part of the problem in Delta.
No, he's not. There's like a crazy cultist dragon woman who's like running around stealing things. Like, she doesn't explain her motivation.
His solution is just to, I side with the crazy dragon lady, I guess. He's just like, we're going to send it to another dimension and it'll be their problem. And
well, here's the thing. She doesn't really explain her problem.
Yes, I understand
until
that. But
like much later.
Steven is very staunch about everything, and like this is the only way to do it. He actually feels very close-minded in the Delta episode, as opposed to a world traveler type thing. And I know he helps give you a Latias or Latios in the remakes, which is not in the base game.
Well, can we just touch on that real quick? I know this is one thing that Cam did not experience in his playthrough. That's like one of the most jarring, stupidest things of the remakes, is that they just hand you a Latios or Latias on a silver platter and say, here you go, and you can mega evolve it and have fun. It's like, and you get that 4 or 5 gyms in. I think you get it right before you go to Four Tree City. It like stops you right there, and you have to engage in that. And it's so, yeah, it's so bizarre that is in the game. And I don't like that. And that's a whole sequence that involves Steven, and I don't like that.
Yeah, I just didn't really necessarily care for Steven or his motivations or really fighting him. And he wasn't all that difficult either. Like, he seemed pretty easy. He's rock steel
He's easier
type.
in the remake than he is in the original.
He's pretty brutal in the original.
Okay.
In the original, specifically the cradley. F that cradley.
Yes.
Because it's a grass rock type, so it's like it doesn't have many weaknesses.
Well, maybe that's more a fruit of it. The remakes just being aimed toward that XY easier audience type thing. But yeah, I just didn't find him all that engaging when I ran into him or anything. So I'm very cool on Steven, but don't you worry. When we play Diamond and Pearl, your boy will be championing Cynthia for sure.
Let me ask one more character question, and then I want to pivot to a couple other things. And the final character I think we need to touch on to some degree is Wally.
Yes.
And Wally is the strangest character in this game for me.
Absolutely bizarre. Like
it's like you're like a Make-A-Wish rivaling this kid. Like, it's
You're not wrong.
It's so strange how it's approached. Like, oh, please be this boy's rival, teach him how to catch a Pokemon, and then whoop his repeatedly throughout the whole game.
I don't remember it being this bizarre. Like, it
Yes.
really is just.
It really
like,
took this playthrough for it to like hit me like, this is odd. Like,
yeah,
he's like presented as a kid who's got like a terminal illness or something. Like, they're like, because his uncle or his family or whatever like mentions like, oh, he's been sick and so he's got to come live with us, or he's not well, and you're treating our boy so good. It's like, what's the end game with this story arc with Wally? And that's the thing. There is no end game with this story arc. It just kind of, you beat him the final time and then he just goes away, and that's about it.
Yeah, and like May isn't really a rival either. It's like that's like one thing. There's really no like, especially like, I don't want to make this a Johto episode, but to this day, like, I think far and away Silver is the best rival in Pokemon. Like, I don't think that there is much debate about it. I think that Silver's story arc and like how they actually implement gameplay in the storytelling with the Crobat is just like, bro, it's insane. It's so good. And I really think that Blue and Silver are like the only two good Pokemon rivals in my opinion. Like, I think after that, it's just like, all right.
Well, I don't want to spoil everything for. In fact, don't say anything about this. Because Max does not know, and I want this to stay hidden from him. But everything with N in Black and White, I think, is pretty cool too.
Oh, phenomenal! No,
that's
phenomenal.
Pretty cool.
But like, I wouldn't say he's a rival.
Yeah, it's a little different.
Like, yeah. No, N is the okay. N is the good part of the only good part of Black and White, and like he is just even better in the actually phenomenal Black and White 2. Like. Because, again, not trying to go off a huge tangent, but, like, Black and White is terrible. Like, if anyone thinks that game is good...
So. I like those games. It's been a long time since I played them, but I did like those games a lot back in the day.
It's... Well, because
I should say, I like those Pokédexes a lot. Like, that is, like, one of my favorite Pokédexes.
So, let me clarify. The technical stuff of 5th gen is phenomenal. And like even in Black and White 1, but the thing is like, and I respect Game Freak for doing this. There was a big, in case you didn't know, Max, there was a big criticism ongoing throughout for like the past 2 generations that there wasn't enough variety in the Pokemon, in the wild Pokemon you could catch. So in Black and White specifically, they decided, all right, every Pokemon in this game is going to be Unova. It's only going to be Unova Pokemon. But the thing is, Unova has the worst Pokemon designs in the history of Pokemon. So it's just
he's aware of them. Ice cream, the gears,
it's just
like
all
stuff like
the
that.
worst Pokemon.
Ice cream.
And then in Black and White 2,
is this the chandelier one too?
Yes.
No, Chandeler's 4th is Sinnoh. Don't speak bad about Chandelure.
No, that is Sinnoh. I'm sorry.
I was thinking of regularly object-shaped Pokemon.
There are still some good ones because there is so many that there's bound to be some like, and that's what I like is like the overall. There is so many new ones.
You're right, but like legitimately, there's maybe 5 Unova Pokemon that I like maybe 5, and it's just like, and so, but then Black and White 2, the thing that makes it so good is the story. Like the story is so good in Black and White 2, that makes it one of the best Pokemon games. And they do fix the whole, like, it's not just Unova Pokemon. It really is phenomenal. Like, if I wasn't already like doing a podcast with y'all on this, that is like the game I want to return to the most is Black and White 2. Because again, I didn't like the first one, and my buddy who's huge into Pokemon, like he's the one who like lent me his copy of Emerald to play. He's like, I know you didn't like Black and White 2, but you gotta give this a shot. And I did, and it is, in my opinion, like arguably top 3 best Pokemon games. Like, and yeah, and
we're ending this season with them, and I'm really looking forward to them. Like it's like like of the ones coming up, those are the ones I'm looking forward to going back to and revisiting. Yeah, because I just think there's a lot of good stuff there.
Because I do really want to actually try and start making a living Dex, because I thought about it. It's like, it honestly wouldn't be that hard, outside of like a few legendaries, because you can get through like most Pokemon games in 20 hours if you know what you're doing. Like it took me just under 19 hours to beat Emerald, and like, so it wouldn't be that hard, especially in 2023, and like I would be very look forward to replaying through Black and White 2 specifically. But yeah, anyway, Hoenn.
Wally. Back to Wally. Sucks. I was gonna say, chime in on Wally real quick, Max.
Bulbapedia says Wally is a young, sickly boy who lives in Petalburg City. Despite his illness, his dream is to train Pokemon. A few sentences later.
Is he actually sick?
What is his
illness is never explained, but his symptoms appear to clear up in clean air, suggesting that it is either acute bronchitis or asthma. So this is a very much like you are helping a sick kid.
bronchitis is temporary. Asthma is not like a. It's. I mean, yeah, I have asthma. It's a permanent illness, but like,
Sure.
You're making him sound like he's a Make-A-Wish kid.
That is what Bulbapedia says. Wally, in my notes I wrote, is just a big crybaby. Like, you just have a crybaby rival, which is kind of a downer because the rival.
I don't want to say he's a crybaby. It's just like,
I remember him crying. It's probably when I wrote that.
Who are you throughout this entire game?
That's the thing, and like his introduction is bizarre because isn't your dad the one who's like, hey, I want you to meet this person, and this is my friend, and this is his nephew Wally, and will you please hang out with Wally? Like, he really is presented in the game as like, take pity on this young child and also battle him and whoop his butt like multiple times throughout the game. It's like, this is so odd.
I wasn't a fan of Wally. I feel like having the rivals split this way actually kind of robbed it of that rivalry. I do think some of the sub-leaders in Team Aqua were better rivals, like the beefy dude and stuff. Like, who was the team in Emerald?
Matt.
It's Magma and Aqua at the same time.
Oh, see, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so
that's
basically in the story of Emerald is like they each take one of the orbs, and you have to go to both locations where Groudon and Kyogre are, and then the orbs react to them, and then they go to Sutopolis, and then you go get Rayquaza.
Got it.
Wouldn't that just create too much land and too much water at the same time, which would just result in like neutrality, and then they'd be fine?
I think what happens is, I think it's like raining or something, like kind of like permanently.
Oh yeah, isn't it like? But it's like permanently sunshiny or something like that too, or something. I can't remember.
It's what I literally played this like 2 days ago. Like, I like zoomed through this game this week because I know I'm the one holding things up, and like I'm pretty sure it was raining. I feel like it was raining consistently until you resolve that.
Yeah.
So or something rather like that. Which is one of the. I actually think that this is the generation where they introduced the weather moves, right? There's the sunny day.
Cast form is in the game as to kind of play off of that.
Yeah, like those are cool mechanics, specifically in like potentially like competitive, that is cool. Like if it rains, right, that if you use thunder, it will hit, like there's without a doubt, and because it normally has like 70 accuracy.
Max is learning things about Pokemon today that he didn't know.
And then if you have
this
sunny,
changes strategy for the future.
And if it's sunny out, you use sunny day, you can use solar beam immediately. You don't have to charge up.
Yep.
Very good.
So it's like those kind of effects that are really cool. Like hail is just like, oh, if you're a non-ice type, you are dealt some damage. Same thing with sandstorm. Like, if you're not a ground type, you take some damage. But like those two moves specifically were really, really cool. But I'm trying to think about what else we haven't talked about that.
Well, there's one thing I wanted to broadly mention that I feel like we haven't touched on, and then we can maybe talk a little bit more about. I want to talk about music and post-game stuff, which we've already done a little bit in regards to the remakes. One thing I just really wanted to touch on really quickly, because I know we speaking about it in regard to Black and White made me realize we really haven't done it so far with this gen, other than just like the diversity amongst the Pokédex. But I think one of the strengths of Gen 3 here in the Hoenn Pokemon is that there are some of the best designs of any of the Pokemon games in this gen. Like, I really like some of my favorite Pokemon of all time are in this gen. Like, I think of Salamence as one of my favorites, which I know is just like a dragon type, but like I like the 3-stage evolution of that, and how you end up getting Salamence from Bagon. Like, I even think like with Norman, I think his Slakings are, I think those are an awesome type of Pokemon, and not everything here is fantastic. Some stuff is as simple as Whale Lord is a giant whale, which is just like, okay, but Sharpedo I think is an awesome water type. There's a lot of like really good designs in this game that I thoroughly enjoyed, and the remakes, when I talk about the designs too, I think about the old sprites in these games, the ones that Cam you would have definitely seen, and the ones we were robbed of in the remakes, because everything since Pokemon's gone 3D has been saturated and dull, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But just what were you guys' opinions on the Pokemon, at least when it comes to like look and I don't know what cool factor or whatever you want to, just the general designs.
I mean the Pokemon designs, like, for me, are a big part of what makes me like love a region in most of the time. And again, like, I do think that Hoenn is like the last generation where like moving forward, I kind of like have felt, not that like every Pokemon game since then has been bad, because that's just not true, but like when it comes to the region and the Pokemon designs, they just have kind of gone down over time to a certain extent. Unova, I think, is like still the bottom, but like there's still like, you know, Gen 6 to Gen 8 like also haven't been great. And I think that, like, first off, I think that Trico, Torchic, and Mudkip are all great starters. Like, they're all solid. Some better than others, but like I don't think any of these starters are bad. I don't really like Mudkip's evolution line, but I think that just those three as starters are really cool.
Agreed. Yeah.
One of, you know, we eventually, I don't know if y'all have your own like top 6. Like, if you were to have a Pokemon team of all the Pokemon that exist, this would be your team. But Flygon is on my top 6.
I love Flygon.
Flygon is so cool. Like, Flygon is like my flying Pokemon rep. Like, he'd be the Pokemon I'd be flying around whatever region on. Like, it's so weird because it's just such a weird evolution line. It's like Trapinch, which is like some sand crab thing.
That's like one of my favorite things about Flygon, though. Is like that evolution line is so crazy.
Yeah, and then Vibrava, and then you get to fucking Flygon. It's like, what a weird line, but like I really do love Flygon a lot. That is like the number one for me. Like, when it comes to Hoenn, I think the outside of Groudon, I like all of the designs for the legendaries. I think Groudon is definitely the weakest link there. I really like Jirachi. I really like Deoxys.
I think the Reggies are really cool, and just how
the Reggies are cool, especially how they're implemented into the game. Right? It's kind of like it's kind of like their version of the Hoenn's version of the unknown. Right? You're trying to like figure out the puzzles.
That combined with the legendary dogs, or their version of Moltres, Zapdos, and Articuno, the legendary birds. Like, they do something different with like that trifecta. Like, they bring back a trifecta of Pokemon, but it's much different. And then they expand on it later with Regigigas or however it's pronounced.
I like this Dex. This is one of those ones that, like, as a kid, I always saw these Pokemon, you know, just in TV and the cards, and like my friends would have them. So I definitely was aware of this gen and these designs. I did look up the Game Boy Advance Dex here on Cerebi, and I'm looking at these sprites, and they're so beautiful. It's, oh my gosh, 2D sprites are the best. So I am kind of bummed. Again, another reason I probably maybe should have played the Game Boy Advance version.
It would have looked so good on the Pocket too.
It'd be so crisp. Incredible. It'd be a crispy little game. Yeah, it is. I liked I remember as a kid seeing the I guess the Lunatone and the Soul Rock, thinking that was cool. Just like the Sun Moon concept, not the games, but the Pokemon themselves. There's Absol. I'm a big Absol fan. So I like seeing that design here.
Zangoose.
Yeah, it's cool. And then Jirachi is one of my favorite legendaries, and I was always thought Deoxys in its multiple forms was pretty cool as a kid too. So this Dex brought a lot of stuff in that I'm fairly fond of, even if I wasn't there to play it all the time. I will say the electric balance, there are no electric like we talked about, and Swampert is kind of lame, even though Mudkip is great. Blaziken's a goat, so not the animal goat, but it's a good Dex. It's a good designed Dex, even if it's a little imbalanced. It's not as rough as some of the stuff we've played so far this season.
Which is, I think part of the reason I find Gen 4 a letdown.
Don't you dare besmirch my sweet, sweet child.
I like, there are some standouts in Diamond and Pearl that I like, but I think just comparatively, like, it's like such a downgrade from Hoenn. Sinnoh is such a fall off.
I agree.
And I think they, I like black and white, but that's the whole other conversation too. I acknowledge that there are some crappy designs in that generation. We've naturally touched on a lot of other things here. The big one that we need to dedicate some real time to discuss here for a moment is the music. We've talked about like the meme nature of this soundtrack and how I think that has, like, if anybody is talking about Ruby or Sapphire in 2023, it is more often than not making a joke about the music and the trumpets. And heck, that's even like the little call we're having in here was like a joke about the
which
trumpet.
I didn't know the reference to. I was just like, I don't know what this means, but okay, sure.
That
so,
was
like,
I think when I told Max about these games, I was like, "Oh, Max, we're finally doing it. It's time for the trumpet games." And so that was his initial introduction to these games in that regard. But the soundtracks, phenomenal. Like, this is one of my favorite Pokemon soundtracks. Like up there with the original Red and Blue. I don't know. Like depending on the day, I really could say that this is my favorite. I think a lot of the Pokemon soundtracks stand toe to toe with one another.
I think I personally, like, broken record, but I think Johto's soundtrack is like not just the best Pokemon soundtrack. I think is one of the best soundtracks in video games.
Yeah.
And I think that, but I think that the soundtrack in Hoenn is great. Like I think that, similarly to most of my other feelings about Pokemon after Hoenn, is that like I think that it's the last memorable Pokemon soundtrack. Like I don't really think about like I could not like hum a part of a tune of any other soundtrack after Hoenn. Like it's just these first three generations, they're so like iconic with their music. I kind of like get the whole like trumpet meme about it, but like I never thought that was a bad thing. Like I don't know, and I think that the big part of Hoenn, which makes it stand out at the end of the day, and I think you could say this across like really any facet of the game, is that it wanted to differentiate itself from the first two Pokemon games. Like it was a new system, it was a new, they wanted to like be completely new from across the board, and just like not associate itself with Kanto or Johto. So everything that they did, I think, was very they wanted to be very particular on the decisions that they made with how this game was designed from the ground up. And I think the music is a part of that, and for the better. Like I think that's one of many of the reasons why I love Hoenn, is because of how different it is from Kanto and Johto. Like I like Hoenn more than Kanto simply because like I get Kanto in Johto. I don't, and I do think that like Johto, after when you play the Johto games, outside of like some story stuff, you really don't need to play the original like Kanto games. Like I mean, you can play like Fire Red, Leaf Green, which are great remakes, and like you could arguably play Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee if that's how you want to play those games, like that generation that's available to you. But I think that Hoenn, like, it has everything. It did everything that it needed to do to stand out, and I think it's succeeded. And like, I think a lot of people a little bit younger than me and Logan's and Max, I don't know how old you are off the top of my head, but like
Logan and
Max and I are basically the same age. Yeah.
Oh, okay, like that are a little bit younger than us. That's like, because like for me, like a lot of people my age will agree that like Hoenn is like the best generation of Pokemon. And you can say part of that is from us growing up with that generation. You could say part of that is nostalgia. I do not think that's the case, because I think that even Heart Gold Soul Silver, when that re-released, proved that like, no, Johto is just that special and that well made. But like, I do think people that are like 5-6 years behind me in age, which so like early 20s or mid 20s, like thinks that Hoenn is like the peak of Pokemon. And while I disagree, like I can see why. Like there's so much that can be presented to argue that idea.
Cam, when you mentioned they were bringing it to a new system with the Game Boy Advance, and it was a new generation, not to hit it on the nose too hard, but it was this new power, new technology. They had tapped out the Game Boy and Game Boy Color and now had more power, more better sound chip. And I was listening to some of the music, and again, I kind of really wish I played the Game Boy Advance version because it sounds so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need to listen to the Champion theme at the end and then compare it to the version in Alpha. It's like, dude, it's like night and day. Like the melody is the same, but it's so different.
I think each battle has a really high energy to it. And I do think part of that is the trumpets, but each battle feels like exciting. You're in there. It's a great theme. What's the guy's name? Junichi Matsuda. Yes. Cranking out another banger battle theme. I wrote down like Wally's final battle has some electric guitar that comes through. I liked that. I thought that was pretty cool. And the Elite Four theme has a really positive, upbeat kind of like you're doing it, you're going forward. Mm-hmm. So it's a solid soundtrack. And I want to go back and listen to the Game Boy Advance one in more detail here with, higher volume and stuff, because this is good. These are themes that stand out. I think I'll obviously have a huge bias towards Kanto and Sinnoh because those were the games that I did play as a kid. And so that's just what I grew up listening to. But this is strong. This is solid. And I think probably the Game Boy Advance version is better all around. So maybe...
I was just going to say, it's crazy that even with a more limited hardware, that soundtrack is better. Like they have more at their fingertips with the 3DS version, and they do a worse job with it. So
yeah, I also want to shout out like and I feel like stronger about it again with Johto, but like shout out to the surfing theme in this game. It's so good. It really does feel like you're just kind of exploring the open seas in a way. Like I think that the surfing theme for me in Johto is more iconic, but I think that like the way the like when I listen to the surfing theme in Hoenn, it makes it like sends the idea that that the water's more open and there's more open travel on the waters on the sea than like Johto, where you're just kind of like surfing through smaller portions of water. I think that like the surfing theme in Hoenn like fits the theme of what you're doing in Hoenn very, very well. And like the biking theme is all right.
It's not my favorite.
Compared to Johto, like Johto's biking theme, like it lives in my head like forever for the past 20 years. It's a great soundtrack, and I think that the battle theme is great, and it's still like, I think what was, again, for that time, what was so good about it is that it made itself different enough from like the battle themes of Kanto and Johto, while still feeling like the original Pokemon battle theme.
Yeah, it's strong stuff.
Yeah, and I think that there's like really again, just kind of can't say enough that like this kind of era of Pokemon, like we're unfortunately like never going to get it again, and like Pokemon has evolved into something more that like I think that again this is a franchise for children that's aimed at children, and so they have to keep that interesting for them at the end of the day. And it's nice that we'll always have these games, and hopefully like we'll be able to get another iteration of these of that region, whether it be like, while it's not what everyone would want, like whether it be like Let's Go or like the Legend series, which would be so cool if they like did like something like Legends that was, it wouldn't be able to be like straight up Hoenn, but something in that like vein.
Oh yeah,
imagine make it a more water focused
in Hoenn focus.
Yeah. What if it was that
really
that primordial story, like back when Kyogre and Groudon were first battling it out, and Rayquaza shit, like you could lean into that whole lore that they were making in the Delta episode and stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, I would want something like Johto first, but like, because I was so jealous of like people who stand Sinnoh when Arceus was announced, but I would love to see like a better a better iteration of that, because like Legends was good, and like I know that it gets really interesting towards the end, but there were just like some things that just I didn't really vibe with in that game that could make a really cool story for like you said, like that would be a perfect example of what that story could be, is like the primordial Kyogre and Groudon, and like, or like in Johto there could be like stuff with Lugia and Ho-Oh in the past, or even Celebi. Just we may not get a one for one of what we've gotten, of what the Hoenn games are now, but I think we can get something similar in the future, or something that is inspired by it.
I mean, you're talking a lot about the legacy of this game and stuff, which is what we're naturally going to lead to here next. And kind of like going off of that, like I think to me, what this game's legacy is the evolution of the Pokemon series. Like you talked about, Cam, about how we'll never get anything like this ever again. And a lot of that is just because this was very much an experiment within the series. Again, they threw a lot at the wall to see what would stick and what they could carry forward. Like obviously Pokemon was successful enough at this point that they knew they had a multi-million-dollar franchise on their hands that was not in danger of like going away overnight or anything like that. But coming off of the Game Boy Color games, it was like, okay, well, where do we take it from here? And there was a lot of experimentation in this game, and there was a lot of ideas of how can we design a different type of map, and how can we introduce new gameplay elements, and what do all these things look like in practice. And so a lot of this game's legacy to me is just that experimentation, and them trying to push the series into its next phase and its next chapter. And like you were saying, like we're never going to get anything like that for us, but it's good we still have these games. Like I'm very happy that I grew up playing this game, I guess. Like I'm glad this game launched when I was 8 years old when it launched.
Yeah.
Like that's just such a sweet spot for this to come out, and to really like, again, I know this isn't as much your experience, Max, but like we said, like exploring every inch of this world, learning that there's 3 mythical rock, steel, and ice Pokemon in this game, running to grab a strategy guide while I'm at Target with my mom, learning that I need to put Relicanth first in my party and a Whale Lord last, and then go interact with this wall, and then it sets off this chain of events in the game. Like there's just so many secrets and things tucked away in this game that were really cool to uncover as a kid. And just everything else we talked about too, like going in different directions with the champion and the story and how rivals work. And like just a lot of things in this game were very different than before. And that's what stands out to me going back to it all these years later.
I think as someone coming to this generation in their late 20s, I mean, I'm almost 30 for Pete's sake. It's interesting. It feels like this was Pokemon trying to step up in maturity and scope. The story's a bit darker to a degree, not a dark way, but like the evil team is trying to basically destroy the world to a degree. And I know that actually gets worse in Diamond and Pearl with like manipulating time and space and stuff. So there's this like evil trend of the teams, more than just Team Rocket doing mean things to Pokemon. But it was Pokemon growing up, taking advantage of new hardware at the time, both honestly on the Game Boy Advance and the 3DS here with the remake. This was there was the Fire Red Leaf Green remake on Game Boy, and then Heart Gold Soul Silver on the DS, and this was the next kind of big remake using the power of the 3DS, leaning into this 3D world. And while I don't think that panned out necessarily from a technical or even visual design, it is interesting that both iterations of this generation were tapping into new hardware and trying to push the franchise forward in some way. And, I like it. It's a solid generation, and you see actually a lot of the framework that we have come to know today being fleshed out here. And that's interesting to me because you think of Pokemon as a big legacy thing with Red and Blue and the trading card game and thing just building up from there. But really, that was almost thrown away to a degree, not the core mechanics, but we are building something new here. And I see that even if I'm only playing the remake and not what definitely probably is the superior version of the game, which would be the Game Boy Advance ones. So it's cool. It's cool to see it and finally experience this generation. And even though I betrayed myself and did not choose a Mudkip.
Which is, I just have to throw this out there because I didn't. That's one of the great sins I think you've made so far in this season, which is fine, but come on, you've been named Mudkip on all these platforms for so long, and then you play these games finally, and you don't choose a Mudkip. Like what? You had to see. Yeah, you just had to do it. And then your water Pokemon in the game was a Pelipper of all things.
I told you I wasn't happy with Pelipper. I told you I wasn't happy with it.
Oh no!
Yeah, you got to ridicule him, Cam. He screwed it up.
I had
needed
wall
fly,
rain, but
and I needed surf, and I wanted to minimize how much crap I had in my team.
You had a Flygon.
That was a very late acquisition. Very late.
Glad you got a Flygon. Do we we should actually talk about that? Like what teams entered the Hall of Fame for us? Like where were our full teams?
We all had Blaziken.
Yeah.
I had a Flygon and a Pelipper, as has been called
also had
out.
a Flygon.
What were my other ones? I had the Ice Frostlass. I had a Frostlass. Yes. I had a Galadriel, the Psychic Fairy. I guess
Gardevoir.
Fairy back. Gardevoir.
Gardevoir.
Okay.
What else did you have?
I'm trying to think. I don't honestly remember.
I think I passively mentioned a lot of mine over the course of the episode. Blaziken, Salamence, Roserade. I had a Dusknoir this time around, which was fun. I had a Glalie, and then did I say Roserade? I had a Roserade.
You said Roserade. Did you all keep your legendary?
I didn't use one.
We've been battling each other, and we haven't been using legendaries in our battles, so that's why we weren't rolling.
Yeah, we get to the end of every game, and then we duke it out. But the rule is no legendaries in the battle, so we tend to not train the legendaries up.
Yeah, so no Kyogre or Rayquaza or
I did catch all of it.
We caught them, yes, but we didn't use them.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so I had I had Blaziken, I had Flygon, I had Alakazam, which is also one of my favorite Pokemon. I had Aggron, I had Walrein, and then I had Rayquaza.
Oh, my other one was my Lotic that I didn't mention.
Shiftry.
Oh, my Lotic, yeah. Shiftry.
That's right.
I had a buddy trade me one from Omega Ruby, the C-Dot.
Yeah,
and I leveled that up.
I had to call my buddy over because he has a bunch of DSs and he's a Pokemon sicko. And I was like, "Yo, I need you to come over so you can evolve my Kadabra because that's how you had to evolve Kadabras through trade." So he brought 2 Game Boy Advances. I felt like I was 10 years old again, you know?
I've had 2 3DSs that I've been playing with the whole time, and I trade my stuff back and forth. And Mac's like, "You're cheating, Mac. You're cheating." And when I got my
cheating, it's just an unfair advantage. So I tapped into that resource this time around and started getting some.
I got myself a Dusknoir because I had a save file on X and Y, and I was like, "Do I have a Duskcloth on this?" And I thumbed through my inventory, and I did. I was like, "There it is. Okay, I'm trading my Duskcloths over. I'm going to trade it back real quick." So
yeah,
crazy.
No, that's legit.
Yeah,
as long as you play through the games and do it yourself.
Yeah,
fair game.
Sure. All right. Well, I think that does it for Pokemon Sapphire, Ruby, Alpha Sapphire, Omega Ruby. Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to find out more, you can go to chapterselect.com, check out all our other seasons there. You can follow the show at Chapter Select. And a big thank you to our members who support Super Chapter Select. You can find out more by going to super.chapterselect.com. Then you can find Logan on Twitter at moreman12 and his writing over at comicbook.com. You can find myself over at maxfrequency.net and my other show, the Max Frequency Podcast. Cam's been on that, episode 2. Early guest on that show, so you can check that out. And then you can find Cam on Twitter at CamFinalMix. And he does freelance writing all over the place. He's been on IGN, Kind of Funny, So you can check out all his work as well. Thank you all so much for listening, and until next time, adios. Chapter Select is a max frequency production. Chapter Select is supported by you. You can gain access to longer episodes and bonus content by going to chapterselect.com/join. This episode was researched, produced, and edited by me, Max Roberts. Season 6 is hosted by Logan Moore and myself. Season 6 is all about Pokemon. For more on the season, go to chapterselect.com/season 6. You can follow the show at Chapter Select and check out previous seasons at chapterselect.com.